Hello everyone, welcome to Bio2. Today we will go through chapter 6 and we will talk about energies and metabolisms. We will first talk about what kind of energy we can have, either as potential, kinetic, free energy, or activation energies. Then we will touch on the two laws of thermodynamics. Then we will talk about ATP, the structure that we have mentioning a lot in previous chapters. Then we end up with talking about enzymes at the end and how enzyme is being regulated and how enzyme is functions. In every living organisms, we require energy to live. As you understand, you have to eat in order to live. You have to do a variety of exercise and activity, and that's use of energy, and you need to replenish that with either drinking, eating, all of that, and also sleep. Thus, we require energy because every living cells in your body uses energy to live, and the cells uses the nutrients that the broken down nutrient that you eat and other molecules in order to replenish that energy and also export waste and toxin out of your body. So where does energy coming from and how do we obtain it? This chapter we will be exploring that. First, we will talk about energy and metabolisms. We will talk about how energy is flow in the world. Basically on Earth, we get all of our energy from the sun that will be converted by plants, which is our energy producer. They will take the sun's light and produce sugar and energy. Certain animal will consume that plant and we will acquire energy from the plant producer. Then we have our own way of utilizing that energy. Then in a certain way, both plants and animal will have to die and they will be decomposed by our fungi, bacteria, and worms. And eventually all of this process will have a excess heat as a byproduct. Not all process are efficient, so everything will have heat as a byproduct. Overall, we call all of the chemical reactions inside our body that uses and release energy, we call that our cell's metabolisms. And this whole energy flow that we just talked about, we call that the bioenergetics, essentially just biology, the energy within biologies. We will be exploring this more within chapter 7, but overall, when we talked about metabolisms, we talked about the metabolisms of sugar. That's the simplest one. We have our glucose here that will be able to combine with oxygens. These bonds will be the bond within the sugar molecules will be broken and release certain form of energy. And we also release carbon dioxide and water as the byproduct of that energy production process. We will release around 36 to 38 ATP as the process of that. So that's this equation right here that you're seeing, that's cellular respiration. The bottom equation that you're seeing right here, that is the opposite of cellular respiration. It is photosynthesis, whereas you take carbon dioxide and water, combine them with the energy from sunlight to form sugar or glucose, and they give off oxygen as a byproduct. And in the process of forming bond, you're actually requiring energy to form that bond. So again, when you break bond, you release energy. When you form bonds, you will absorb the bond. The molecules actually store that energy as a potential energy in forms of chemical bonds. There's two ways that we can talk about metabolic pathway. One is the anabolic pathway, and the other one is the catabolic pathway. Within the anabolic pathways, you can see here, you're taking many monomers and combining, with an input of energy, you will form a more complex molecules. So the example would be you're synthesizing sugar from CO2 and water, or even the monomers in the macromolecules that we talked about before, where we can synthesize more complex polysaccharide from individual monomers. So that's the anabolic pathway. Then you have the catabolic pathway, where you will be able to acquire energy by breaking down complex molecules into individual parts. And this is what you see in the case of cellular respirations, where you take the stored energy from the bonds within the sugar molecules in order to produce energy. And in terms of cells, we produce energy in the forms of ATP. That's where we store our energy short term. And we are requiring to use both of these energy in order to maintain that cell's balance, the balance between getting energy and also excreting waste. And an easier way for you to remember this is essentially anabolics. You're assembling a complex molecules. In catabolic pathways, you are cutting apart the more complex molecules. So all of these biosynthetic processes, they are critical to the cells, because in our cells we constantly requiring ATP to perform cellular work, and we haven't really talked about this yet, but there's also other molecules such as NADH and ADPH. So NADH is just an electron carrier within animal cellular respiration process. And NADPH is within plant. It's the respective parts in plant. So again, ATP is a very important molecule that we need a sufficient supply at all times. Without ATP, our cells would not be able to function, and we would not be able to breathe. We would not be able to do a lot of our cellular processes like grow. All of that requires energy. That's why we have to eat every single day. These metabolic pathway that we talked about, they do not take place spontaneously. Spontaneously here means that they do not occur on its own. Spontaneous here doesn't really mean that it occurs suddenly or in an instance. It's more of it do require an energy input to make it happen. Then because of that, we will have to use specific enzymes in order to catalyze each of the steps of these biological reactions. Whether that's catabolics or anabolics, we have to use an enzyme to speed up the reaction rate. We will be talking more about enzyme in later sections.